In 1922, Jiddu Krishnamurti was overwhelmed by something inexplicable, excruciating pain, altered states of consciousness, mystical visions. But he wasn't the only one experiencing it. There were witnesses. They saw everything. They wrote everything down. In this video, I'll walk you through one of the most mysterious and astonishing awakening processes ever documented. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a biography, it's a story that will leave you speechless. In 1922, Jiddu Krishnamurti, a young Indian philosopher destined to become one of the most radical spiritual voices of the 20th century, moved with his brother Nityananda, to whom he was deeply attached, to the town of Ojai, California. Nitya was seriously ill. Tuberculosis was ravaging his lungs, and they hoped that the mild climate of the American Valley could offer him some relief. The two settled in a simple pinewood cottage surrounded by lush nature. The valley opened before them with clear streams and orange trees, a landscape that seemed to offer peace and healing. And for a few weeks, Nitya's condition appeared to stabilize. But soon, unfortunately, his health began to deteriorate again. Krishnamurti, while trying to remain calm, was deeply worried at the thought of being left alone to face such a painful situation. It was then that Rosalind Williams appeared, a 19-year-old American girl, sister of a theosophist, who took care of Nitya with a gentleness and dedication that left a deep impression. The small community in Ojai also included A.T. Warrington, General Secretary of the Theosophical Society in America, who lived in a nearby cottage, and from time to time they were visited by Mr. Walton, a vicar of the liberal Catholic Church. It was in that setting that during the month of August, Krishnamurti experienced a spiritual event as disturbing as it was mysterious, which he would later refer to as the process. It was a series of altered states of consciousness, accompanied by intense physical pain and inner visions that deeply affected him and those around him. 15 days after the event, Nitya wrote a report inspired by Mrs. Annie Besant and Charles Leadbeater, central figures of the Theosophical Society, in which he attempted to convey the intensity and transformation experienced by everyone present. His words are emblematic. As to the true meaning of the event, to its exact importance, you will naturally be able to tell us if you wish. But here, it seems to us we have been transported into a world in which the gods have returned for a short time to walk among men, leaving us so transformed that it feels as though our compass has found the North Star. All began one evening when Krishnamurti felt tired and restless. A painful swelling had appeared at the base of his neck, something that immediately caught the attention of Nitya and Rosalind. The next morning he seemed fine, but right after breakfast he lay down to rest, and that was when the strongest manifestations began. Rosalind and Nitya sat outside the room while Warrington monitored Krishna's condition. At a certain point, Warrington urgently called Rosalind. Krishna was in the grip of intense suffering, with groans and spasms, as if shaken by an unknown force. Rosalind rushed in and found him trembling, with chills similar to those of malaria, but with one unusual symptom. He complained of an unbearable heat. Rosalind tried to calm him, but the trembling and heat alternated in almost feverish waves. Krishna, semi-conscious, couldn't explain what was happening, muttering names and images as if he were living in another time or place. He spoke of Ojai and of the people who lived there, the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in India, as if they were present in the room. Every slightest sound, the rustling of the curtains, the clinking of a glass, even a distant plough, deeply irritated him. His sensitivity had become extreme, almost otherworldly. Rosalind and Nitya did everything they could to keep the house quiet and dim, but any noise seemed amplified in Krishnamurti's perception to the point of provoking discomfort and bursts of anger. Nitya sat near him, but not too close. Krishnamurti had become so sensitive that even the faintest jingling made him flinch. At lunch, he seemed to calm down enough for Rosalind to bring him some food, which he accepted. But shortly afterward, the discomfort returned. Vomiting, tremors, agitation. The afternoon passed in a state of semi-consciousness, while Krishnamurti's body continued to undergo jolts and spasms. Only in the evening was he able to find some peace and sleep. The following day, Krishnamurti remembered very little of what had happened, but what had begun that night would forever mark his life and his spiritual vision. It was the beginning of a long inner journey that would lead him to break away from the Theosophical Society and embark on his own radical path, free from masters and spiritual authorities. One day, while the process continued relentlessly, Krishnamurti had an extremely intense vision. Watching a man repairing a road, he experienced a complete identification with everything. The man was him. The pickaxe in the man's hands was him. The stone being struck, the nearby tree, the blade of grass, even an ant. Everything was part of himself. Even a passing car, the driver, the engine, the tires, was himself. I was in everything, or rather, everything was in me. For the entire day, he remained in this state of bliss and unity with all creation, an experience that marked the beginning of his transformation. The 20th of August, 1922 was the most intense day. Krishnamurti appeared to worsen, gripped by fevers, tremors, and delirium. He kept confusing reality with visions of faraway places such as Adyar in India, the headquarters of the Theosophical Society, and he desperately wished to return there. In an altered state of consciousness, he began to perceive the filth of the house, of things, and of the people around him as unbearable. He sobbed, expressing the desire to take refuge in the forest. At last, he went out alone, carrying a pillow, and sat beneath a pepper tree, away from the group, surrounded by darkness. After just a few minutes, a solemn and sacred atmosphere enveloped the valley. Everyone felt that something immense was happening. Rosalind, seated not far from the others, entered an ecstatic state. She saw the radiant figure of the Bodhisattva Maitreya, the future Buddha according to Eastern tradition. Her face became transfigured, and she spoke as if receiving a divine message, responding with emotion, "I will, I will." Even the others, though they could not see what she saw, perceived the power of the presence, such an intense manifestation of the divine that it moved and inspired them deeply. All around them, a profound silence descended, accompanied by celestial music that everyone clearly heard. Rosalind kept repeating through tears, "Do you see it? Do you hear the music?" At the end of the vision, Krishnamurti stood up and emerged from the darkness, returning to the group. Overwhelmed by emotion, Rosalind fainted, and upon waking, remembered nothing except the sound of the music. The next day, the tremors and pain returned. Once again in the evening, while sitting under the same tree, Rosalind saw 3 radiant figures approaching. They seemed to take Krishna away, leaving his body seated there, motionless. Later, Krishnamurti recounted having seen himself leave his body and observed the scene from outside. Above him, he saw a shining star and felt the presence of great spiritual masters, the Buddha, the Lord Maitreya, and Master Kuthumi. "I have seen the light. I have drawn from the compassion that heals all pain. I have drunk from the source of joy and eternal beauty." I am intoxicated with God. This process did not end with those nights in August. It continued for another 3 months, almost every night. During the episodes, Krishnamurti would lose consciousness. The Krishnamurti I seemed to withdraw, leaving the body in a state where a greater force operated through him. It was as if a more instinctive part of his being, referred to by Nitya as the physical elemental, took control and endured the pain while an invisible inner work was carried out. It was an experience difficult to interpret. Some theosophists, such as Annie Besant and Leadbeater, believed it was a third spiritual initiation. Others hypothesized that it was the awakening of the Kundalini, the dormant spiritual energy at the base of the spine, which, once awakened, leads to inner liberation. But Krishnamurti's case was unusual. It did not exhibit the standard symptoms of Kundalini awakening, but rather phenomena such as extreme sensitivity to sounds, loss of consciousness, hallucinations, intense bodily heat. Aversion to physical contact, all of these manifestations defied simple explanations. And yet, Krishnamurti never asked for a doctor. It was as if, in some way, he recognized the importance of that mysterious process and allowed it to unfold without resistance. As the months passed, the mysterious process that overwhelmed Jiddu Krishnamurti intensified. The pain struck with violent spasms in different parts of his body, so much so that, in the most acute moments, he would writhe and plead for it all to end. He felt an unbearable burning. A light too intense forced him to live in dimness, and he often lost consciousness. His body, day by day, appeared increasingly exhausted. By September, the work of the entities that seemed to guide the process focused on his eyes. They told him they were being purified so he could see the divine. But for Krishna, it was agony. It was as if his face, without eyelids, were exposed to the sun of a desert. One night, he announced that a great visitor was coming. That evening, he spoke unconsciously with invisible presences that seemed to congratulate him. The physical elemental, the instinctive part that seemed to take over the body when consciousness withdrew, mistook Rosalind for his deceased mother and spoke words that left everyone breathless. "Mother, now everything will be different. I have seen it, and now nothing matters." Then the pain returned. They were opening something in his head, causing such intense suffering that he cried out, "Please, close it." At times he spoke like a child, recalling his childhood and even his mother's death. When that phase ended, Krishna seemed able to return to daily life. Pine Cottage in Ojai officially became his new base, and he devoted himself intensely to the Order of the Star. He gave lectures in the United States and traveled to England and Austria, but in August the process returned with force. One night he exclaimed, "It has never been this bad." In October he received an inner message, perhaps from Master Kuthumi, addressed to Nitya. It said that the work was about to shift back to Ojai and that the success of the operation depended on Nitya. The message was clear and powerful. Any negative vibration could jeopardize everything, like a clay vessel still wet that might crack. Total attention and dedication were required. Back in Ojai, the pain returned with intensity. A new message was transmitted through Krishnamurti. The work being carried out was extremely delicate, unique in the history of humanity. Everything had to be subordinated to that process. At the beginning of the year 1924, Krishnamurti's body was worn out by 2 uninterrupted months of suffering, but suddenly something extraordinary occurred. One evening, he felt a force rise along his spine, split and merge between his eyes, and in that point, he saw a flame. He saw the Lord, the Master, Nitya. Among the few who could grasp the depth of this experience, spoke of the opening of the third eye. According to yogic tradition, the Ajna chakra, located between the eyebrows, is the center of inner vision, the transcendence of duality. Here, the two fundamental energies meet, creating the possibility of perceiving other dimensions of reality. Although Krishnamurti did not display paranormal powers, after this experience, his vision expanded profoundly, outlining with increasing clarity the foundations of his future thought. Annie Besant and Leadbeater were informed, but they never made it to Ojai. Leadbeater, confused, could not understand what was happening, and from that moment on, he distanced himself from Krishnamurti's path. The process, however, continued. In April, a new divine message arrived. It was an encouragement for the effort endured, a blessing and an exhortation to remain steadfast until Wesak, the great festival in May. The pain would return, like the waves of a long spiritual intervention. Each time the process subsided, Krishnamurti resumed traveling. He visited England, the Netherlands, and eventually arrived in Pagine in Trentino, where he held talks on the path of discipleship. He spoke of the need to open oneself to the unknown, of purity of body and mind, and of emotional discipline. He used the example of Ananda, the beloved disciple of the Buddha, to show how necessary it was to surrender entirely to the Master, but the process tormented him every night without respite. One night, Krishnamurti conveyed a message he believed came from Maitreya, an invitation to forget oneself in order to discover the divine, to seek the light in the present, in the stones, in the humblest things. There was no need to search far. The Master was already there, ready to help, if only one would allow it. Meanwhile, his brother Nitya was getting worse. After reaching Australia, he was moved to a mountainous area for treatment. Krishna was disturbed by the ritualistic and competitive atmosphere that reigned in the local theosophical community. His relationship with Leadbeater had grown cold and distant. Even though Nitya seemed to be improving, the journey back to Ojai was hellish. The illness struck him hard and relentlessly. Annie Besant and Leadbeater reassured them the masters would not allow Nitya to die. But it wasn't so. While Krishnamurti was aboard a ship traveling toward India, Annie Besant arrived with a face ravaged by grief and a telegram in hand. Nityananda was dead. That moment was a rupture. The death of his brother was not just a personal loss, but a total collapse of all certainty. Everything he had believed in, the entire system of theosophy and the masters, suddenly appeared hollow. During the 10 days of the journey that followed, Krishnamurti was inconsolable. At night, in a state of semi-consciousness, he wept and called out to his brother in Telugu, their mother tongue, which he no longer spoke while awake. It was not only his brother who had died, but also his past, his blind faith, his childhood. And yet, within that pain, something was beginning to bloom. He wrote words filled with maturity and beauty. An old dream has died, and a new one is being born, like a flower pushing through the hard earth. Now, my brother and I are one. I now possess a greater strength and faith, a deeper compassion, and a broader love. When he disembarked in India, his face radiated a new light. The loss had stripped him of everything, but in that empty space, true understanding had blossomed. He would later say, one must die completely to oneself in order to discover love. He was ready to begin a new path, one with no masters, no intermediaries, no religions to follow, only truth to be lived. In December of the year 1925, during the Congress of the Order of the Star, under the shade of a large banyan tree, 3,000 people were gathered around Jiddu Krishnamurti. It was the anniversary of the so-called visit of the Lord Maitreya into his body. While concluding a talk on the world teacher, his voice suddenly changed tone. In a silence charged with awe, he spoke in the first person. And I come for those who seek sympathy, who seek happiness, who aspire to be free. I come to reform, not to destroy. For many it was clear that at that moment the theosophical prophecy was being fulfilled. The human vehicle had been consecrated and the advent had begun, Annie Besant declared it with solemnity. Krishnamurti himself did not appear outwardly different, but something within him had changed radically. He said he felt like a crystal vessel in which every person could place a flower that would never die. He described himself as a shell, an empty container. It was the confirmation of what he had experienced, a spiritual event that had led him to feel one with the divine, yet also detached from any personal identification. In July of the year 1925, at the castle of Erde, Krishnamurti spoke again, once more with a voice full of intensity and awareness. He invited everyone to look through his window to discover that what truly matters is not what one does or says, but the burning desire to enter the dwelling of truth. He spoke with strength and tenderness at once, saying he did not want people to break away from what they believed in, but to ask themselves, was anyone among them truly happy? Had anyone tasted eternity? His was an invitation to universal love, to deep feeling, to attentiveness toward every living thing. To those who wished to walk with him, he asked that they feel through his heart, see through his mind, and protect what he wished to protect. For Krishnamurti, that was the only life worth living, and yet his words began to trouble the leaders of the liberal Catholic Church, and even some within Theosophy. He spoke without dogmas, without symbols to be worshipped, without hierarchies. The Order of the Star was transformed into an organization with no beliefs or authorities, with the sole purpose of cooperating with the world teacher. But his declarations became increasingly difficult to categorize. Krishnamurti stated that he felt one with the beloved, but clarified that this beloved was not a single figure. It was Sri Krishna, Master Kuthumi, Lord Maitreya, Buddha, and at the same time, something that went beyond all these forms. He was not interested in explaining who the beloved was, because he knew that true understanding could only come when one saw the beloved in every blade of grass, in every animal, in every human being. He had known all the images of the divine offered by tradition and theosophy, but now he transcended them all, and in doing so, he also transcended the very figure of the Master. He clearly stated that he had never claimed to be the world teacher, but now that he felt one with the beloved, he affirmed it without hesitation, not to impose himself, but to awaken in each person the desire to discover truth. His identity dissolved into something vaster. He was like a flower offering its fragrance to the air, without concern for who might breathe it in. He reminded the members of the order that they had always been bound to the authority of Annie Besant and Leadbeater, but that truth could not come from others. It was within themselves. There was no need to ask who the beloved was, because the answer lived in every living being. His thinking had now taken on great clarity. He rejected rituals, blind devotion, the worship of his own person. He spoke of freedom, of inner revolution, of the need to constantly look within. He dreamed of a new language, a vocabulary capable of breaking mental patterns. No one could grant liberation from the outside. Each had to find it for themselves. But he, having found it, could point the way. But the break with theosophy became inevitable. At the top levels, the entire structure built on hierarchies, initiations, and rites began to tremble. Krishnamurti was unstoppable. He clearly said he had no disciples, that each person was a disciple only of truth. He rejected any cult of personality, any idea of good and evil imposed from the outside. To him, evil was that which is feared, and good that which does not cause fear. Once fear is eliminated, man becomes free. He loved to call the divine simply life. To those who questioned him about his identity, he would reply, "I am everything because I am life." And he would conclude by saying that if the Order of the Star ever dared to consider itself the holder of truth, he would dissolve it. What was happening was not the fulfillment of a theosophical plan, but the beginning of the inner revolution of a man who had looked truth in the face and was not willing to compromise it with any system. His journey toward total, individual and spiritual freedom was just beginning. Thank you for listening this far. This is not just the story of an extraordinary man, but a reflection of a path that belongs to each of us. The courage to look within, the strength to let go of all certainties, the silence needed to truly hear the truth. If this journey touched you, even for a moment, leave a sign, a thought, a gesture. Give a like, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to stay connected to content that speaks to the heart. It is through these shared fragments that the possibility of a new understanding is born.